Welcome back to our live training session. We're going to be taking a look at how to do cold start, warm-up enrichment style tuning, as well as acceleration enrichment tuning and charge temp approximation table tuning. These topics definitely have to be gone through when you're calibrating and tuning. You want to make sure that your engine's going to run consistent, and depending on whether it's cold or whether the air temperature starts to get really hot, you want to make sure that everything is in order so your fueling is good. And then also in transient tip-in events, when we're, let's say, driving steady state and we give some large throttle input, we want to make sure that the fueling is correct for our engine. So the very first thing that we're going to be taking a look at here is our cold start warm-up enrichment style tuning. Now, I've let the vehicle sit overnight. Previously, yesterday, we were doing the low cam wide open throttle tuning, so now I've let it sit, the engine sit here overnight. It's bone cold, so we have to look at a couple compensation tables that are going to be essentially adding or potentially adding more fueling onto what we've already developed on a warm engine. So a couple things, let's just take a couple steps back and let's talk about this real quick. So the main volumetric efficiency table, this represents two things. One, steady state airflow coming into the engine, and then two, the fueling for the engine when it's warm. When the engine is cold, we have essentially a completely different fueling characteristic for the engine. Now, why is that? Well, when we're spraying our fuel out of the fuel injector, it's going to stick to the intake track and in the intake port, intake wall, intake valve. Each engine cycle, when the engine's cold, we don't have as good of atomization of the fuel compared to when the engine is warm. So as a result, each engine cycle, as we're spraying the injector, it's spraying into the intake port, into the intake walls, and it's trying to get the fuel into the engine, we're going to be coming up short. We're actually going to find those droplets are going to stick to the ports, to the intake valve. It's known as a wall wetting effect. So we need to be able to overcome that and make sure that each engine cycle, let's say we're losing 20% fuel sticking to the port walls and to the intake valve, we need to overcome that and potentially use a modifier table so when the engine's warming up, we don't have a potential lean condition. So we need to go and actually test this and see how the engine is going to respond. Every engine's going to be different in terms of what it wants for the cold start warm-up enrichment, but we'll talk about what tables come into play here in just a few seconds. Now, we also, in addition to this, have airflow that we need to account for. So drive-by-wire, we know that with our drive-by-wire idle control, we're opening the blade to a certain percent, and then we can vary the blade opening based on how far we're off from the target idle speed. We've set up the idle base position table when the engine was warm. Now when the engine's cold, we may find that the throttle angle needs to be closed or open more to meet the desired target. So it's important that we go through everything here from start to finish with the cold start and the idle control. We know on a warm engine everything's good, but now on a cold engine things are definitely going to be different. Now specifically if we're talking about idle control, we're going to find that we generally need more throttle blade opening on drive-by-wire, or if you have an idle control motor, you'll have to open the idle control motor more when the engine is cold because we have a torque loss. We have a lot more frictional drag on the engine cold, and therefore we need to overcome that frictional loss, that torque loss, by giving it more airflow, more torque, so we can compensate. So in a cold engine, we have poor atomization, we have high frictional losses. That equals less torque and less fueling to the engine. So we have to essentially account for the specific condition when the engine is cold. Now the best way to do this is, again, dial everything in 100% when the engine's warm, so we know we can crank fire, run the engine. We know that our fueling is in line when the engine is warm. Now any discrepancies when we fire off the engine cold, or any idling problems that we have when the engine is cold, we know that it's not anything hinging upon anything we've done warm. We know that's good. Now we can take a look specifically at these conditions. So let's go and break this down a little bit further. Let's go in here to our fuel trim page, and let's take a look at what we have here to work with in terms of getting our engine to crank fire, run cold, and then making sure the fueling is correct as the engine is coming up to operating temperature. So we have our cranking enrichment table. Right now, the cranking enrichment is based on our multi-fuel blend ratio. We know that that's based on our flex content. So right now we're at roughly 10-15% ethanol content. We can see we're going to be hovering right here. In fact, you can find the cursor right here in the table. Now here we're going to be saying 150% multiplier to whatever is coming from, if we jump back over here to fuel, whatever is coming from our table right here. Let's click H. We can find we are hovering right about here in the table. So it's going to take this value and it's going to multiply that by 150% of what we would normally find on a warm engine for cranking fuel. So if it cranks, takes a lot of cranks to fire off, that means we need more cranking fuel. If it cranks and fires and runs pretty quickly, then we don't need to really go in and edit our cranking percentage multiplier, but that's how that works. Now, taking a step back here, once we hit about 350 to 400 RPM, Link's going to know that the engine is cranked and it's actually it's meant to come out of the cranking mode and go into the normal run mode, where it's going to be taking all of its calculations from the main VE table, and then it's going to also then start to apply our post-start and then potentially our warm-up enrichment. So the post-start is used next once the engine cranks, fires, and runs for the first bit of time that we specify here between the hold time and the decay time. It'll go in and add this much percentage fuel against whatever is coming against our VE value that we're calculating from. So wherever it's operating right here, whatever vacuum we're pulling, engine speed we're pulling here, it's going to calculate what that pulse width is going to be. And if we take a step back here, it'll multiply that by this percent, and then it'll hold it for this much time, showing about a second, and then it decays that away about 6 seconds, 5 seconds, where we're at for this coolant temperature. So we're only adding this large amount of fuel for a very short period of time, and then we're decaying it away. The idea behind this is that we need some fueling to be added into the engine so it can stabilize the engine once it's fired off. Now, once it actually fires off, it transitions into the warm-up enrichment table, and this is going to be referencing engine coolant temperature, and it's going to be adding a percentage of fueling here as the engine comes up to normal operating temperature. Now, in my case, I'd consider normal operating temperature about 140 degrees and warmer. I have a colder thermostat in this, and it'll run a little bit cooler. So I'm going to say here 140 and warmer. We're definitely going to make sure we zero out the table here. Now, we don't have any values populated in the table. We can see that the values are all 0 here on the colder engine coolant temperature. A lot of times with the model mode, we don't need to go in here and have a lot or any warm-up enrichment. Sometimes things fall right in line if we have our injection.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.